He's literally sprinted into the studio to join us. Owen here with the European markets. A bit stuffed after that cheap credit feast laid on by the ECB, aren't you? That was your trouble.
That was why I was running down the newsroom, just to work off a bit of that excess. But of course, it wasn't me gorging on all that cheap credit. It was Europe's banks, once again, a second long-term refinancing operation just to ease, well, that's the idea anyway, credit conditions in Europe a bit. As Stuart says, a good opportunity perhaps for investors to take a little bit of money off the table, as they've done a little bit muted on the markets. You can see all the European markets starting the day just a fraction off, between 0.2 and 0.5%. Just a few earnings out for you. Vivendi, their share price down 7%. They had a record year, nearly 3 billion euros in profits, but a warning of some very tough conditions ahead for 2012, particularly for its mobile telephone operations. Peugeot's share price down just 2% as well. Had a very good 24 hours trading or so, of course, in the wake of GM announcing that it's buying a small stake in Peugeot in order to share component sourcing. The Asian markets, again, pretty muted day's trade all around. The Nikkei ending the day just a fraction off. The Hang Seng down over 1% as well.
Apple, though, they're feeling the love at the moment.
Yeah, thankfully, Apple just managed to drive a little bit of trading yesterday. We know the story here. It needs no introduction. This company absolutely flying right now and has entered what they call the 500 club over in the US, one of a handful of companies, the likes of Exxon and so on, whose market capitalization is now $500 billion. Yes, that's $500 billion. You can see the share price just goes up and up and up, now trading at around $540 a pop. And there's big excitement once again about a new iPad rumoured to be out next week. Well, let's get a little bit more on this whole European refinancing operation. We can cross to Charlie Parker. He's the investments editor at Citywire in London. Charlie, good morning to you. Once again, some big money on the table from the European Central Bank. 500 billion euros in long-term refinancing. The Bundesbank has already said it doesn't really like the look of these LTROs at all. It's hardly a revelation. But are those concerns now from the Bundesbank any less valid, given the success of what the ECB has been doing, especially when it comes to lowering the borrowing costs of countries like Spain and Italy?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the Bundesbank and indeed the hardliners in German government are becoming increasingly marginalised on this issue. There has been a growing international consensus that had the European Central Bank not stepped in this way, there could have been really quite a radical credit crunch at the end of last year. You know, it's always very easy with these situations to say, oh, well, how much has it really helped? But you have to also step back and say, where would we be without it? And I think without it, we could have potentially had a very nasty credit crunch unravelling the Eurozone right now.
Also, of course, problems in the UK, in England. The governor of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, saying the trickle-down effect onto households is a myth. It's a bit harsh, isn't it? Because Eurozone bank lending, it's improved a bit in the last month.
You know, it has improved a bit. UK bank lending also has improved a bit. But I think he is speaking to a reality of this crisis, which is because this recession began with a credit crunch, the banks have been in trouble. And whenever the banks have been able to build up their own balance sheet, they have done it rather than lend money out to the public. And that has made the banking sector effectively a dam, stopping the money that the government is pumping into the system getting to people in the way that they would like it to. Lots of schemes have been considered to effectively sort of bypass the banking sector. None of them yet have proved entirely practical.
Charlie, yeah, I know a lot of UK journalists, when they go to the ECB, myself included, ask Mario Draghi what the difference between something like this long-term refinancing operation and quantitative easing as we know it in the UK. Can you spot any real difference between them right now?
Well, no, it is a bit academic, the difference. I suppose you would have to say that quantitative easing in the UK is directly intended to generate growth in the economy. That's what it's for. So the idea is that banks are going to get hold of higher risk investments and then get that money out to the economy. The ECB's operation is not really about growth. It's about stability in the banking sector. So I think there's a sense in which, although it's delivered the same outcome in the short term, quantitative easing, you would hope, would ultimately lead to greater growth, whereas the scheme by the ECB, they will probably be happy if all it does is shore up the banking sector enough to avert a financial crisis.
And it's been said, hasn't it, Charlie, as well, that the ECB inadvertently kind of setting up Eurozone banks for another fall in 3 years' time. Is that a realistic fear, do you think?
Look, it's a realistic fear, but I think we should also be encouraged by the fact that all around the world, the whole force of government policy right around the world right now is about taking risk out of the banking sector. That is what the one thing that governments across the world all agree on right now. So there will be a different world in 3 years' time. The banking sector will have been allowed to take less risk for quite a long period of time, and it should be easier for them to refinance. But look, you can't preclude the risk. If we don't get any growth for the next 3 years, if banks aren't able to fully rebuild their balance sheets, of course, the ECB could just be having to do the same thing again in 3 years' time. But an enormous weight of policy right around the world is going into stopping that.
Charlie, good to talk to you as ever here on Live from Paris. That's Charlie Parker, Investments Editor at Citywire. Thanks very much for being with us today.
Okay, next here on Business, redrawing the map of Europe's car making. The tie-up between GM and Peugeot is the latest example of transatlantic partnerships between European car makers and their US cousins. GM has bought a tiny stake in Peugeot, but that stake belies the greater significance of what's going on between these two struggling car manufacturers that both need each other to keep their European operations going.
A combined force to be reckoned with, the world's top car maker and Europe's second largest auto manufacturer are forging a strategic alliance. General Motors and Peugeot Citroën hope to save between them around €1.5 billion a year within 5 years.
By pooling the purchasing of components and services with that of General Motors, Peugeot should be able to save money on its operating costs.
The car giants are seeking to bring down their costs through economies of scale. They hope to save money by buying raw materials together, by sharing components, and reducing the cost of research and development. General Motors hopes that this will help turn the fate of its struggling European units around. They lost €700 million last year. Unlike Europe, the Chinese car market is expanding rapidly. GM sold over 2 million cars in China last year and could help Peugeot expand there. PSA wants to more than double its market share in the Asian giant before 2020.
So a challenge ahead there for both those companies, with the first joint GM Peugeot car due to roll off the production line in 2016. But as we were saying just a moment ago, Stuart, this really has sort of redrawn the map of European car manufacturing. You've got lots of different types around the world, some successful, some not so successful. This is just the latest one. Remember, Fiat and Chrysler have jumped into bed together. You're now got the prospect of Italian cars entering the US market. Remember that Chrysler was in a partnership with Daimler, but was dumped out of that just as the European financial crisis hit. Remember as well, you've got Renault, another French car maker. That's been in partnership with Nissan for the best part of 10 years now, and that's often been cited as an example of a partnership that really turned around the fortunes of a company pretty quickly.
Excellent. All right, thank you very much, Owen. What did they do? Just stick half of one car and half the other one together? Is that the idea?
Half and half the engine.
Excellent.
Steering wheel here and there.
Probably looks like a bit like my old car. Owen, thank you very much. Owen Fairclough with the business as ever here on France 24, and Claire's got the very latest headlines for you. She'll be here after the weather and the break. Stay with us.